Okay, class, good day. Now, for our discussion today, we'll tackle your microtomy. Now, microtomy is very important in understanding how you would process your tissues. This will give you an idea on the main equipment that you would be using in cutting your tissues. So, let's start. Now, microtomy class is defined as the process by which processed tissues that had been fixated, dehydrated, and cleared is trimmed and cut into uniformly thin slices. So once you're done with fixation, dehydration, and clearing class, and you've already trimmed and cut it, yung paraffin tissue nyo, you're going to use this microtomy to trim and cut those tissues into thin slices. It's very important that you create these thin slices, class, so that you could view the pathologist could view the tissue in a well preserved and a uh, well decent appearance. Now the equipment here is your microtome. This is an instrument capable of cutting a section at a predetermined thickness. Now your microtome has three parts. There's the block holder. The block holder class is also known as the chuck. This is the part where the tissue is held in position. To simplify class, it's the one that holds the tissue in place. Block holder siya. Then we have your knife carrier and the knife. This is used for actual cutting of the tissue section. And then we have the screws. The screws would include the pawl, the ratchet feed wheel, and the adjustment screws. This is used to line up the tissue block in proper position with the knife. Now, the principle of microtomy class is that the spring balance teeth or pole is brought into contact with and turns a ratchet feed wheel connected to a micrometer screw, which is in turn rotated, moving the tissue block at a predetermined distance towards the knife for cutting sections at a uniform thickness. So sa microtomy class, you need to hold, or the microtome would hold the tissue block in place. And once it's in place, class, a moving knife would move to the tissue at a predetermined distance until makakat siya in a determined thickness. Now, there are different kinds of microtome. Let's start with the classic one, or the first one, your racking microtome. The racking microtome class is also known as your Cambridge. It is used for cutting serial sections of large blocks of paraffin embedded tissues. This was invented by Paul Duell Trefal in 1881. It is the simplest and oldest type of microtome. In here, class, the knife is fixed or stationary, and it is the block of tissue that moves through an arc. So instead of having the knife class move, yung knife mo yung hindi gumagalaw, stationary ang knife mo dito. What happens is that the tissue is the one moving through an arc. Commonly, a section is cut as the tissue passes the knife edge in a slightly curved plane in a 10 to 12 micrometer thickness. So, makapal yan, class, 10 to 12 micrometer thickness. Theoretically, it is not recommended for serial section because of this. So, due to the thickness, class, it's not recommended to do multiple sections or serial sections. In emergency cases, the rocking microtome may be used for frozen section by freezing the tissue with ethyl chloride spray. Not currently favored due to the restriction in size of the tissue block that can be cut and the difficulty in orienting the block. Then we have your rotary microtome, also known as the Minot, invented by Minot in 1885 to 1886. It is the most commonly type used for both routine and research lab, especially for sectioning paraffin embedded tissue. Now, in your rotary microtome class, the knife is fixed in a horizontal position and is stationary. The block is moving vertically up and down. Sections are cut between 3 to 5 micrometers using paraffin wax for diagnostic histology. Thinner sections can be acquired using synthetic resin. Not suitable, class, please take note, for large blocks or hard tissue. Now, the difference between your rotary microtome from racking microtome class is that the knife and the block holder are brought together by upward and vertical motion. Di ba sa racking microtome class, the knife is stationary and the tissue block would be the one moving. But in this case, class, knife and block holder are brought together by upward and vertical motion. It is heavier class and more stable than the racking microtome, more complex in design and construction. At the same time, it is more expensive. Now, the third one is the sliding microtome, invented by Adams in 1789 for cutting of celluloidin embedded tissue, recommended for cutting extremely hard and rough tissue blocks. Now, there are two types of sliding microtome, the base sledge and the standard sliding microtome. Now, the base sledge microtome class, please take note, is used for very large blocks of tissue, such as the brain, and used for cutting tough tissue blocks, which may offer great resistance to the knife. Sections are cut in a perfectly flat plane, thereby making excellent serial tissue section. It is comparatively more stable than the ordinary sliding microtome and is commonly used in neuropathology and ophthalmic pathology. Then we have your standard sliding microtome. Now, you need to remember here, class, is that the thing you need to remember in standard sliding microtome is that the block would remain stationary while the knife is moving backward and forward during the process of sectioning. Usually, class, ang knife nyo in rotary in a horizontal, but this time, it moves in a forward and backward manner for the standard sliding microtome. Thus, class, this is considered more dangerous because of the movable knife. Then you have your freezing microtome, also known as the cold knife microtome, invented by Quequet in 1848. This is a type of microtome class that would give best result and is used almost universally for cutting frozen section. It is firmly clamped on the edge of the bench for use or mounted on a specially constructed shelf with carbon dioxide cylinder below or other refrigerants such as your liquefied carbon dioxide, liquefied nitrogen, and even freon. Now, the purpose of freezing microtome glass is used for cutting unembedded or gelatin embedded blocks frozen in liquefied carbon dioxide, nitrogen, freon gas, and other refrigerants. It is also used to cut undehydrated tissue in a frozen state. Usually, class, ang freezing microtome nyo is used for rapid diagnosis. Let's say that the patient is undergoing surgery and the doctor needs to identify if there's a cancer or there's a neoplasm. The freezing microtome would be used. Now, when histological demonstration of fat is also needed, so for fat siya ginagamit, class. And when certain neurological structures are to be studied, when sensitive tissue constituents to be studied are damaged or destroyed by heat. Then we have your cryostat or your cold microtome. This is a refrigerated apparatus used in fresh tissue microtomy. It consists of a rotary microtome kept inside a cold chamber, which is maintained at a temperature of between -5 to -30 degrees centigrade. Average class is -20. Then for cutting sections of 4 microns or 4 micrometers with ease, capable of freezing the tissue into the block holder to the correct degree of hardness in order to facilitate easier and faster sectioning. The reduced temperature of the cryostat allows for the hardness of the sample to be increased. It provides ways of preparing thin sections of fresh frozen tissue and is used in fluorescent antibody staining technique, histochemical enzyme studies, and rapid preparation or urgent tissue biopsies for intraoperative diagnosis. So itong cold microtome class is usually assigned on special laboratories. Napakamahal nito. It's very expensive to buy one. Then we have your ultra thin microtome. So this is used for cutting tissue sections as little or as thin as zero point 0.5 to 1 micra for electron microscopy. The knife used for cutting the ultra thin sections consists mainly of selected fragments of broken plate glass, Preferred knife class are diamond knives, equipped with a glass or gem grade knife. The specimen used is small class, very small yung sample yun dito, fixed with osmium tetroxide and embedded in plastic or epoxy resin. Now, since the block is small, it is brought to the knife edge under microscopical control. As each section is cut, it is floated onto a water bath adjacent to the knife edge. Now, what are the applications of microtomes class? Now, the microtome class is used, number one, in traditional histology technique. In traditional histology technique class, tissues are hardened by replacing water with paraffin subjected to dehydration. The tissue is then cut in the microtome at a thickness varying from 2 to 50 micrometer. From there, the tissue can be mounted on a microscope slide, stained with appropriate aqueous dyes after prior removal of the paraffin, and examined using a light microscope. Usually, it would take 16 hours to finish. Then we have your cryosectioning technique. Water-rich tissues class are hardened by freezing and cut in the frozen state with a freezing microtome or a microtome cryostat. The technique class is much faster than the traditional histology and used in conjunction with medical procedure to achieve quick diagnosis. It would take 15 to 50 minutes more or less to process and release the result. It is needed in surgery wherein the surgeon takes a sample of the tissue organ or specimen and it's processed and tested by the pathologist. The result will determine if the organ is to be removed or cancerous or if the surgeon will close up the patient. Sections are stained and examined with a light microscope. Then we have your electron microscope technique. Now, after embedding tissues in epoxy resin, a microtome equipped with a glass or gem grade diamond knife is used to cut very thin sections, typically 60 to 100 nanometer. Sections are stained with an aqueous solution of an appropriate heavy metal salt and examined with a transmission electron microscope. This instrument is often called an ultramicrotome. The ultramicrotome is also used with its glass knife or an industrial grade diamond knife to cut survey section prior to thin sectioning. Thickness class are usually zero point 0.5 to 1 micrometer. Then we have your botanical microtomy technique. Hard materials like wood, bone, leather would require a sledge microtome or base sledge microtome, which is a type of sliding microtome. So ito yung kaninang sabi dangerous gamitin class. Then these microtomes have heavier blades and cannot cut as thin regular microtome. Now let's go to the microtome knives class. Now in microtome knives, you need to take note of the following. So the trimming and cutting are done and there are three basic types or shapes. We have the number one, plain concave knife. This is a knife that has a length of 25 millimeter. One side of the knife is flat while the other is concave. So flat yung isang side, concave yung less concave sides are for cutting celluloidine embedded tissue blocks on a sliding microtome. More concave sides are used to cut paraffin sections on base sledge, rotary or rocking microtome. Then we have your biconcave knife, has a length of 120 millimeter in length. Both sides are concave for cutting paraffin embedded sections on a rotary microtome. Then we have your plain wedge knife, has a length of 100 millimeter. Both sides are straight. Recommended. Recommended for frozen section or for cutting extremely hard and tough specimens embedded in paraffin block using a base sledge type or sliding microtome. Now I want you to remember the angle class. There are angles in cutting. We have your bevel angle. The bevel angle is also known as your facet angle, 27 to 32 degrees. The angle formed between the cutting edges. Thus, the smaller the bevel angle, the sharper is your knife. Then we have your clearance angle. Your clearance angle class is also known, please take note, as wedge angle. This is 10 to 15 degrees, the angle between the block face and the lower facet of the knife. Now take note of the parts of the knife class. We have the heel. This is the angle formed by the cutting edge and end of knife nearest to the handle. Then we have your toe. Toe is the angle formed between the cutting edge and end of the knife, which is farthest from the handle. Now let's go to honing and stropping class. Now your knives, like typical knives, would usually get damaged with constant use. Badly nicked knives with blunted edges have to undergo sharpening. So they have to undergo sharpening class for the following purpose. Ensure optimum sectioning of tissue block, prevent gross irregularities on the tissue section, and prevent tears or stray in tissue section. Now, the sharpening would involve two stages. The first one is honing. Honing is also known as your hard sharpening. Involves the removal of gross nicks on the knife edge. So, if this is your knife class and there are nicks here, let's say a typical knife would look like this. But in the cases we're in, there would be a depression here, there would be a nick here, there would be missing spaces. You need to make or you need to do honing. You need to remove the nicks on the knife edge. Now, this would be used to remove blemishes, grinding the cutting edge of the knife on a stone to acquire an even edge. Sa honing, you're going to use a hone. An example of a hone is oil stones, a natural sharpening stone or hard grinding surface such as your carborundum, which serves to remove nicks and irregularities on the knife edge. Now, honing refers to the grinding and the cutting edge of the knife on the hard abrasive surface in order to sharpen the knife. It makes use of a hone or oil stone to remove the needs and the irregularities of the knife edges. Sorry, this should be to remove the nicks and the irregularities of your knife edges. The degree of sharpness is proportional to the fineness of the abrasive used in sharpening. Now, there are different types of hone. We have your Belgian yellow, used for manual sharpening and gives the best result. Arkansas, used to finish honing, finishing touch. It is used after coarse honing and gives more polishing effect. Then we have your fine carborundum. It is much coarser than the first two and used only for badly nicked knives, following by either one of the first two knife sharpening. Now, to care and handle your hone class, the surface of a hone is wiped clean with a soft cloth moistened with saline to remove the scattered small particles of stone and metal. It is then covered with a thin film of mineral and clove oil, saline, liquid paraffin, or soapy water for lubrication. After its use, the hone must be washed with a warm, soapy water, dried, and kept in a box to protect it from dust. Edge first with the heel to toe direction. So please remember the direction of honing class. Start with the edge first with the heel to toe direction. Heel to toe direction. Now, stroking would depend yung number of stroke, yung pag-move class from heel to toe. If you're using or if you're honing a plain wedge knife, it requires 10 to 20 stroke. But if it's a biconcave knife, 20 to 40 strokes. Now, the lubricant would facilitate honing and remove metal cutting, light oil such as mineral oil, machine oil, and vegetable oil. You could even use dilute paraffin solution. So all of these class are lubricants for the hone. Silene lubricant facilitates honing and removes metal cutting. If unavailable class, you could also use salty water, dilute paraffin, and silene. Now let's go to the second part. The second step is stropping. Now stropping class is already process of polishing an already fairly sharp edge. So you were now able to remove the nicks via honing. The next step would be the stropping. Stropping class is basically polishing it. Pinapolish nyo yung knife. It is where in a process wherein the burr formed during honing is removed and the cutting edge of the knife is polished. So if this is your knife, you would be able to see here some burrs. So to remove this burrs, you need to do stropping. It makes use of a strop, which is a leather strip used to remove the burrs created by honing. This is used to polish and sharpen the cutting edge. If the knife has become dull and blunt but is free from nicks or teeth, it is usually only necessary to strop it. So if your knife class has no damage, hindi lang mapurol lang siya, you just have to strop it. Now for delicate work, the knife is strop free before every object is sectioned. Direction class, opposite naman siya. Kung sa kung sa honing nyo, it would be a heel to toe. This time naman, edge would be last with a toe to heel direction. Number of strokes, 40 to 120 double strokes, 80 to 100 strokes on each side for a biconcave knife. So remember that. Now, hair care and handling of a stroke class. Leather strokes are usually dry and would require oiling before they are used. Strokes are usually treated with vegetable oil such as castor oil, applied into the back of the stroke, not the surface. Mineral oil is not recommended since it will tend to blister and destroy the leather. One drop of mineral oil will spoil the polish of that area and produce a permanent blemish on the stroke. If you are using an automated machine, 30 strokes class are required in each direction, and your knife is being sharpened by the revolving iron wheel with both edges being sharpened alternatively. Now, yung honing and stropping nyo class is rarely or no longer practiced because of the availability of disposable knives. They are cheaper to use and have a sharp cutting edge that can cut 2 to 4 micron sticks thick sections with ease. Then kindly take note of the following knives. So magnetic knives used for cryostat, glass knives used for electron microscopy. So for trimming and semi-thin sectioning of tissue blocks for EM. Then storage siya class in dust-free boxes with lids. Then we have your diamond knives used to cut any type of resin block for EM. Brittle and expensive, but very durable, and the cutting edge class must be kept clean to make it cut longer and avoid damage during sectioning. So that